Hey everybody, it's Jenna. We are officially in the Lanterns era, and I am so happy to be here unpacking the first episode with y'all. Over the course of this video, you will see two Jennas. Me now, after I watched the episode for the first time, and future Jenna, who just got back from attending the press conference and the premiere. There is a lot to unpack, so let's just get started. We begin the episode in 1996 with young John watching a slightly younger Hal be interviewed on 60 Minutes. The interview reveals a lot right out of the gate. He has been operating as a Green Lantern for over 10 years, as he was, quote, already protecting Earth when he was first publicly spotted in 1986. He went public after stopping a meteor over Victoria Falls, a real-life waterfall in between Zambia and Zimbabwe that Superman and the Flash visited in Superman number 199. And his interview is being described as the, quote, first ever heart-to-heart with a superhero, which provides some really interesting context for the DCU as a whole. By that point, metahumans had already been a fact of life for 250 years, and there was already a very clear public history of them donning costumes and secret identities, which would probably result in TV or news coverage like this. So this being the first ever has two meanings. Hal could be the first superhero to publicly unmask themselves in this kind of context, or at least the first to do so in the modern TV era, and superhero could be a relatively new term in universe, which is something that does have a precedent in the comics, as costumed crime fighters were referred to as mystery men, before someone like Superman or Wonder Woman went public and broadened people's horizons. Obviously, Superman was still decades away from going public in 1996, but maybe Wonder Woman or someone like her was responsible for the shift towards calling people superheroes. I don't think Hal was solely responsible for that shift, but he was definitely a part of it. It also seems, just based on these space age adventurer vibes and the line that Carrie has later in the episode about how, quote, there's a difference between hearing about aliens on CNN and seeing it up close, and Macon's comment about how the world reacted to Hal going public, that Green Lantern really helped shake people's understanding of alien life, which is really cool. I like the fact that the massive, overwhelming feeling of we are not alone in this world can still happen to a fictional world filled with shark men and speedsters and Nazi-killing robots. The interview confirms more specifics about Hal. He was a former test pilot at Ferris Air, which is where the interview is seemingly taking place, and which the Clayface trailer confirms still exists in the modern day. Before that, he was an Air Force veteran, which was kind of nebulously implied in the comics up until 1981's Green Lantern number 144. More modern comics like New Frontier and Jeff Johns' run on the title have leaned into that part of his profession more wholeheartedly. By that point, Hal's reputation for being a mess was already so crystallized in the comics that the idea of him following orders in the military honestly seemed a little quaint. And so it wasn't really surprising that he was eventually kicked out of the Air Force for crashing planes and just generally being dangerous. I like that we get a bit of that contrast here with how he and John view the chain of command. Hal's very snarky, go respect it is perfect. Hal also lost his father, Martin Jordan, in a plane crash when he was 8 years old, a plot point that was first established in 1989's Green Lantern Emerald Dawn number 1. His line about how, quote, once that happens, there's nothing to fear anymore, pretty perfectly captures how that story was retold in Green Lantern's Secret Origin. The 2011 movie made that event into a huge inciting incident for Hal, but this version already feels so different. Both feel motivated by their grief, but the way that this Hal talks about it feels both like a truth and a way to compartmentalize all of the emotions that he doesn't want to admit that he's feeling. Through this scene, we also learn about John. He has two older brothers, one of whom is named Marcus, which diverges wildly from John's sibling relationships in the comics. Some stories give him a younger brother named Damon, a younger sister named Ellie, or in a crossover with Huckleberry Hound, yes, really, an older brother named Scott. And Black Lightning co-creator Jenny Blake Isabella originally wanted John to be siblings with the character's wife Lynn, which never made it into the comics but carried over into Young Justice and the Arrowverse. We also see a bit of John's complicated relationship with his father, down to him William telling an apple off of his head. The line of bullet holes in the garage door is such an evocative image, and it makes it all the more shocking to learn later on in the episode that John still talks to his father in the present day. The first scene in 2016 of Hal and John's very unique road trip is one of the clips that we saw during the Hall H panel at Comic-Con, and I somehow love it even more in context. The two of them pushing each other's buttons and Hal fully doing a U-turn in the middle of the road are both brilliantly done. Hal also mentions that he disappeared for 2 weeks to go on a mission, which is such a part of the Lantern job description that practically everyone gives him shit for it in the comics. He says that the mission was on Farron 4, which was created by Mike Barr and Gil Kane in 1982's Green Lantern number 156. The planet and all of its shapeshifting residents try to gaslight Hal into thinking he's on Earth, but he does not fall for it. There's also De La Farron, who was created by Gardner Fox and Kane in 1965's Green Lantern number 41. When Carol Ferris turns down an offer to be the Queen of the Star Sapphires, Dela is chosen as her replacement, in part because they look exactly like each other. It's a whole thing. Dayla shows up and fights Carol, assumes her identity, and nearly marries Hal before he realizes the truth. Dayla returned decades later, either presenting as a blonde or as a very cartoonish looking alien. According to legend, she was dating the Green Lantern of her sector and then killed him as soon as they hooked up. And then we and John meet the hologram, a backup of Hal's consciousness that was made a decade prior, so at some point in 2006. While that exact technology is not rooted in the comics, there are some capabilities of the ring that are pretty similar. The ring can create an astral projection copy of someone, known in universe as an energy twin, when another Lantern or the Guardians need them for something. And the rings also have a history of holding people, or sometimes entire pocket universes, inside of them. Sometimes people get trapped in the ring by accident, as was the case for Beverly Blanding in Green Lantern number 10, and sometimes it's used as a space prison and a sort of precursor to the Science Cell. Long before Hal got his ring, Abin Sur used it to trap an evil wizard named Merwidden, who has one of my favorite goofy character designs of the entire Silver Age, and who caused havoc in there for decades. There is a really beautiful issue of The Green Lantern that explores an entire society springing out of Merwidden's time in the ring. I love the idea of the hologram for several reasons. His dynamic with John is delightful, and he's a way to illustrate just how messy Hal continues to get over his tenure as a Lantern. Him giving present-day Hal shit for not teaching John obvious stuff is great. I talked about this scene at the taco stand in my Comic-Con video, but there are still some fun things to glean about it in context. I particularly love Hal's explanation of why he isn't wearing the suit as much anymore, comparing it to when an older man stops wearing a tie because he doesn't have as much to prove to the world. I know people have had strong feelings about the suit, the lack of footage of it, the fact that it can hang in a closet instead of just morphing over a Lantern's body, which, for the record, is canon, and the fact that it's as worn down as it already is. But I think this explanation that Hal gives fits into all of that really well, and it makes sense for both where he is in his life and in this universe. Like I said up top, Hal is seemingly the first modern superhero in the DCU to willingly reveal their secret identity to the public, and he has been living in that status quo for 20 years. 30 years if we factor in the end of the episode. Comic Hal hasn't ever really gone public in that big of a way. As Hal also puts it in Green Lantern the Animated Series, quote, "Talk to me when your planets invent paparazzi and the 24-hour news cycle," and has usually tried to keep those two parts of his life separate, despite developing a horrible work-life balance along the way. In a world where everyone knows that Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern are one and the same, that work-life balance has to be even worse. And I do not blame this Hal for getting to the point of viewing the suit as a formality that he doesn't always need. He leads with his heart instead of his head anyway. So why wouldn't he fly in his civilian clothes if he was desperate or panicked about a situation? Also, I love the little effect of him breaking the sound barrier as he does it. The suit of it all just feels like a nice change of pace beyond the uniformity of a lot of characters in the MCU and the code switching of someone like Superman. Plus, it feels like a nice contrast to how Kara started to embrace her suit over the course of her movie. I love the gag of John having to fly and drive himself to Rushville. And I talked about the bar scene pretty extensively in my Comic-Con video, and I really hope that I did not oversell how great it is. It is just such a gloriously stupid Hal Jordan plan. Down to him conducting with his fingers while the jukebox starts, ordering doubles of everything at the bar, the shot of him shoved up against the wall, smiling like an idiot while his mouth is full of blood, and him trying to sugarcoat that he, quote, manifested money with the power of his will. Although that is technically against the modern-day Lantern code, there is precedent for him doing it, as he counterfeited a $100 bill in order to gaslight a group of aliens in Green Lantern number 31. Okay. Let's get into Hal's origin. It's a couple years into his tenure as a test pilot, and he's drunk with his jeans and boots still on. He is usually depicted as stone cold sober and wearing his test pilot uniform when it happens, but I will allow that change here. He's suddenly enveloped in a green bubble and transported across the sky faster than he could really comprehend, which is a pretty perfect match. And then he meets the dying Green Lantern in a crashed plane named Abin Sur, and I love his editorializing of calling him a, quote, bona fide fucking alien and nicknaming him Pinko. Created by John Broome and Kane in Hal's first appearance, Showcase number 22, Abin Sur starts out as an ordinary history professor on the planet Angara before being appointed to join the Corps in the 1860s. He canonically ends up on Earth multiple times before his death, teaming up with Hal's ancestor in the Old West, Starman and Bulletman in World War II, and later Martian Manhunter. Why was he in a plane when he crashed on Earth? The Silver Age explanation in Green Lantern number 16 was, unsurprisingly, a little convoluted. Gardner Fox didn't really know when to stop explaining something. Abin Sur fought an alien race known as the Lark, Larifars, trapping most of them in a bubble in deep space. But one Larifar remained and tried to possess Abin's body to free them. In an attempt to draw out the Larifar and defeat it, Abin Sur lied about his ring needing to be recharged, piloted a spaceship in order to conserve its energy, and then fought the Larifar before the plane was downed by Earth's yellow radiation. In the modern retelling, Abin Sur visited Atrocitus's home planet of Ismal, where he was warned that he would die once his ring failed him. In his paranoia, he started to use a spaceship instead of flying long distances, and his ring ultimately failed him anyway when it didn't warn him about the yellow radiation. In either version, Abin Sur crashes on Earth. Hal is pulled into his orbit, and he asks him to be his successor. Instead of Rushville, this all usually happens somewhere in the desert. Hal says Abin Sur's dying words were either good luck or ah fuck, which is a great line. It is also extremely inaccurate to the comics. In the Silver Age, he's telling Hal not to fail him, and in the modern age, he either makes a remark about an Earthman becoming a Green Lantern, or he simply says Sinestro. Would I want to see how these events are interpreted in the aesthetic of this show? Absolutely. Do I basically know this origin story by heart? Yes, but I was still riveted hearing this Hal retell his version of it and being able to fill in the gaps from there, which is really a testament to how this show is approaching its characters and its storytelling. It is such a small detail, but I love how Kyle plays Hal reciting Abin Sur's first words to him. There's this sort of wistfulness and pride, both for how much that moment meant in his life and for the decades that he has now spent filling Abin Sur's shoes and experiencing the gravity of the job description. He almost seems to be on the verge of tears as he's saying those lines, and I'm honestly on the verge of tears talking about them right now, and it is so beautiful to me. Through this conversation, Hal explains why there hadn't already been a Green Lantern from Earth, saying that the Guardians view the planet to be galactic backwater. This naturally raises the question of, what about Alan Scott? Created by Martin Odell and Bill Finger in 1940's All-American Comics number 16, Alan was the first man to hold the mantle of Green Lantern in the golden age of comics. He had the mantle, a ring, and a railway lantern to recharge it, but his gimmick was based more around ancient mythology than science fiction, as the metal that made up his lantern and ring came from an ancient magical meteor known as the Starheart. Once Hal, Guy, and John were introduced and the lantern lore was expanded, parts of the Starheart were retconned to fit into that lore. The Starheart was either made from the corpse of a dead Green Lantern, or was the Guardians' attempt at containing all of the loose magic in the universe. These retcons have turned Alan into such an interesting character, one who is technically connected to the Lantern Corps but can also operate completely parallel to them, which he largely does as a member of the JSA. The comics have even tried to give him a new codename, Sentinel, to separate him even further. I have mixed feelings about that codename, but I do prefer Alan being able to stand on his own from the Lantern Corps, instead of just being regarded to be an early member. The dialogue on the show feels definitive enough to be setting up something like that, if there even is an Alan Scott in this universe to begin with. The Guardians could have found out about Alan's connection to the Starheart and basically decided that it wasn't their problem, and his reputation on Earth could have just been confined to the Mystery Men era that I was talking about earlier. There would be some things to fudge to get there, but it doesn't feel impossible. And either way, in the meantime, I love how the novelty of Earth having a Green Lantern for the first time is fueling Hal's story. And then there's the conversation and everything after it between John and Zoe. I love the exchange of "I'm patient, no you're not." It's obvious to anyone who watches him putting up with Hal's nonsense, and it feels like a sliver of his early personality in the comics, which was a lot less calm and stoic and a little bit more headstrong and outspoken. As Aaron very brilliantly put it during the press conference,
John, to me, is somebody who is a raging sea internally. Externally, he's a gentleman, he's precise, he's accurate, he's intentional, he's clean. But internally, he's a raging sea, he's a tornado, he's a volcano. And I give the analogy of, going to someone's house and it's spotless, but you find that one room that they shoved everything in and it's hell in there. And I've had this is not therapy, so I won't get into myself, but I've had my fair share of learning to master my sober mind and learning to navigate my experiences as somebody who does feel things very heavily and deeply. So I feel very seen by John, and I'm ready to do this till the wheels fall off. To be honest with you.
Lighting her cigarette with the lantern ring is incredible. And I honestly appreciate the choice to have John be the first one to have a sex scene in this show. It shows his vulnerability in a way that none of the other contexts of the show have really been able to thus far. And it's a really nice contrast to having a partner who has a reputation for being a polyamorous space tomcat and sleeping his way out of situations. Hal getting locked up in the broom closet overnight is beautiful. And his trial scene is one of the biggest highlights of the episode for me. I know I cannot go a Lantern video without saying how perfect Kyle Chandler is as Hal, but he ascended to a whole other level with all due respect, Your Honor, come on, and I'm Green Lantern of the Green Lantern. The fact that he doesn't say the Corps and John just calls them the other lanterns in this scene from the teaser is really interesting to me. Maybe the Corps aren't formed yet in an official context, or maybe they were and something cataclysmic happened. We know that they will be a thing by 2025, based on this line from Guy in Superman.
I was commandeered by the Green Lantern Corps to protect this planet.
So maybe by the end of the season, that becomes part of the show. John is vegan, which is not canon to the comics, but totally fits his personality here. And it's worth it for the narrative tension of, quote, eating off of another man's grill, and Hal's line about how, quote, he doesn't believe in anything that causes enjoyment. We also see that John is carrying around a sketchbook, both at the Macon Ranch and in the interrogation scene, which is such a great little character detail. I know people were worried that his military career was going to overshadow his love for art and architecture, but we've already gotten a nice balance just in the course of one episode. And I love the contrast of John bringing in a pencil and paper to work out what he learns at a scene versus Hal just barreling in and processing everything off the dome. I'll talk more about William and the Macon family in the coming weeks, but I just have to commend how twisty the family dynamics already are over the course of one episode. Carrie's face when Hal insinuates that she owes something to William is already so profound. And as someone who loves a situation that a superhero cannot punch their way out of, it is so funny how much of this episode is held up by NDAs. It also continues the thread of the corporations being a major part of the larger DCU story in a really particular and peculiar way. This stretch of the episode has so many lines that I love. Strangers who give me $100,000, no strings attached, usually turn out to be bad guys. He's trust, I'm arrogance. We're all aliens, just depends on what planet you're standing on. And we talking or exploding because it's almost lunchtime. And I've talked about Hal's gutsiness before, and I surely will do so again, but him physically holding the bubble construct to help control the explosion is such a nice detail. It feels like Steve Rogers falling on the grenade, in a way. And finally, we end in 2026, the second timeline where, quote, something else is happening. This older version of John has a goatee, a detail that began with the jump between the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited animated series. At the time, it was a way to show that John had gotten older and that he was starting fresh after being dumped by Hawkgirl. I love having the goatee here and that it seems to be carrying over into Man of Tomorrow as well. There are only so many superheroes who can be defined by their facial hair both in and out of costume, and I'm glad that that gets to be the case with John as he's being introduced to this massive larger audience. And then we have Hal, appearing to have been shot in the head in the school bleachers. Surprise, surprise, I think there is so much more to that than meets the eye. Before Kyle was even cast as Hal, when we were simply in the rumor stage about who might be playing the role, people had already made up their minds in thinking that Hal was going to die. His age range, the passing of the torch to John, and the fact that Hal has very famously died in the comics and returned as the Spectre all seem to lead to the writing being on the proverbial wall. Hal makes a point to say in the 2016 scenes of this episode that he doesn't plan on dying anytime soon. If everyone is expecting Hal to die, why not subvert those expectations? Hal could be dead and still remain a part of the show.
Hey, cool, I'm dead.
Eventually evolving into the Spectre or maybe Parallax. I guarantee that it would be better than how the Arrowverse turned Oliver Queen into the Spectre during Crisis. Or he could still be alive and this could just be a decoy. In an episode that already introduces the hologram and aliens who can assume anyone's identity, there are enough ways for this not to be Hal's actual dead body. I could even see a scenario where John is in on it in some way. A behind-the-scenes featurette that was released before this episode shows the two of them in this era at a diner, so we'll most likely get at least one scene of them meeting prior to his death. Why would there need to be a ruse to begin with? We will just have to wait and see. What did you think of the first episode of Lanterns? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you haven't already done so. As always, you can find me on social media, especially on Instagram and Threads at Hey It's Jenna Lynn. Merch is available at the link in the description. Thank you all so much for watching. I cannot believe that we are here, and as always, go read some comics.